Hi, this is Laurel Van Fossen with another writing lesson from the Creative Writing Meetup in Altspace VR. You can learn more about our weekly meetup at altvr.com or discard.me/writingvr. Today we're talking about writing senses, but these meetups and these videos cover some basic writing lessons. We do a writing lesson every other week, and we write to prompts every other week in between. We cover the tips and techniques, the tools, the process, and often the publishing process as well at our groups. And it's open to everyone. There's no charge, and we'd love to have you come join us. So check out altvr.com and look up the Creative Writing Meetup on the calendar and come join us. So we're talking today in the writing lessons about writing with your senses. We're going to write with senses. Now, when you think about writing with your senses, you usually think about the most common senses, were the first five: the sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste, and how we incorporate those into our writing for a more immersive experience for the reader. So we can bring them right to a moment and engage them, make them feel like they're a part of that story. But there's some other senses that I want you to think about as you're writing. In fact, scientists have found out there's over 21 senses. So I want to talk about that part of writing with your senses as well today. The first group is sense of space, movement, balance, temperature, and sexual senses. Now, the sense of space is when your character walks into a space and it feels like it's cramped and it's crowded and it feels intimidating and it's oppressive. That's a sense of space. We have a very awareness of the acoustic atmosphere in and around us at all times. And there's other spaces that are vast and we feel tiny in this big enormous space where our voice echoes. So as you write, think about giving your character having that sense of space as they move through in their environment. Speaking of movement, movement is one of the senses. We're very aware of how fast things move and how fast we move and things moving around us. So pay attention to those details. And balance is interesting. Most of us have a very strong sense of balance. We can stand upright. But when the world around us is slightly tilted, literally or metaphorically, it can kind of send us sliding off, like a picture where the horizon is slanted. You just feel there's something wrong as you kind of want to lean with it and force it to be straightened. But we also get off balance mentally. So think about that, the sense of balance when it comes to your character or to the people that are around your character. If they're off balance, on balance. We're also sensitive to temperature, and so are our characters. So it can be really, really hot, really cold, but what is that sensation they have of temperature in and around them? And of course, sexuality rules so much of our lives, and pay attention to those details as you incorporate them into your story. We also have a sense of time. We know how the clock works. We get hungry at certain times of the day. We have time rituals where this is the time we have tea. This is the time where we take a walk. We have schedules in and around our life, but we're also aware of time. Or your character can be taken out of time. Now, I don't mean traveling through time, though that's an option. But what happens to a character when a sense of time is removed? When they're put into four walls with no access to the outdoors, what happens to that rhythm that they have? So time is a sense. We're very aware of it, and we can have a lot of conflict when that's taken away. Pain is actually really fascinating when you have a character that's in pain, and that is definitely a sensation. It is a sense, our awareness of pain, our anticipation of pain. There's just moments. Have you ever seen anybody who's getting ready for a shot? The needle might not even be in the room, but they're already tightening up and prepared to experience the pain that may or may not ever come. It's fascinating to watch that sensation in response to pain. Agency, you may be familiar with, but we had one of our participants in our meetup did a great job describing it as a sense of the control of your body. That's kind of what that is. Agency is the subjective feeling of not of the control of your body or control of your body by others. This loss of agency is when it feels like you are out of control and not the one making decisions. Your actions are forced, your decisions are forced upon you. Schizophrenia often feels that way. They lose their sense of agency because they feel like they're a machine or they have delusions of being controlled by others. But think about this for your character, because we all go through this in our own life where we feel disconnected from what's going on around you, or we need to separate ourselves, our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings away from what is happening around us. So we can have that feeling of disconnection, of being distant from our body. That's agency, that loss of agency. Now, I'm probably saying this wrong, but proprioception is a wonderful sense. It's a kinesthetic sense, where you use your kinesthetic energy, your kinetic energy, which is part memory. Basically, it's that ability to stand still, close your eyes, and you can reach your hands up and touch your nose. You know where it is. Your body has that memory of where things are. Now think about a soldier or a police officer, someone carrying a weapon who's been trained in that. They've been trained to know where that weapon is, to know where their communication device is, or someone who's using specific tools, who's a workman, and they know where on the tool belt that, hammer is or whatever it is that they need. They know instinctively because their kinesthetic energy, their muscles have been trained to automatically respond to those things. So it's an awareness of the space and the relationship to it and the things within it and your relationship to yourself and that. So think about how your character has that sense built into him. Interoception is a fascinating sense. It's the ability to detect or sense changes within the body. For example, feeling hungry, or a sudden change in your body's temperature, or your blood pressure, or a response to illness where you're going, something's not right, or you know exactly what's not right, broken bit, whatever it is. So look for those senses. Now, synesthesia is really fascinating. That's the ability for some people are born with it. It's genetic. It's often passed down through families where they can see color associated with mood, with music, with words. Oh, there's different kinds of synesthesia. Explore that. Maybe your character has it, or maybe they're encountering someone with that ability. Now, don't forget, there's also the sixth sense, ESP. There's other unscientific senses. They all add drama and conflict to your writing. Again, there's over 21 possible senses they've come up with, so explore those. Now, C.S. Lacan said, good writers will evoke the unique sense of place by inserting ordinary sounds, such as the clink of glasses, the tinkle of happy banter, the drip of a faucet in an abandoned building, the screech of tires from a car racing away from the scene of a crime. Now, it's not describing what that sense is, but the choice of the words dictate an emotional response. As we're crafting our story, think about the words you choose to create sensation, to tantalize the senses. Clink of glasses triggers happiness. It triggers, the audible sounds, and you get emotional response to those. Maybe it's a celebration. Maybe it's people mingling together. You get to paint a picture that with just the words that you choose to help people feel what's going on. Now let's look at the layers. As we're talking about writing senses, there's layers, and I don't have a lot of time to go through all of this in this really short presentation, but I want you to think about how our senses work in layers. For example, our sight works with color and size and symbols and shapes and all these different things. And then we break those down by symbolism, emotion. We have perspective and judgment and maybe prejudice associated with these things. With our characters, as we're looking at the world around us, we see different things. Color is an easy one. Color has great symbolism. Red for fire, for emergency, black, death, quiet, still. Sometimes it's negative, black and white, negative and positive, different, the white hat and the black hat, and all these things that we have in our cultural symbolism. They also represent emotions attached to those things. Same thing for size. So we have size of the environment that our characters are in. So if you think about a person who's making her very first visit to a big city, say Manhattan, you don't have to say this was her first visit to the big city. You can show us from her small size compared to the towering skyscrapers overhead and the wonderment and the awe that she feels for experiencing this. So that's part of perspective, it's part of judgment. It can help you identify location. It also can represent economic levels. For example, small, crowded, poor homes, or a big, luxurious mansion and spacious things. So the size of things, visual size, can represent economics. It can also represent security. So you have a big, tall person towering over you. So is it a teddy bear type big tall person, or is it threatening? So you can, what does your character feel in response to someone or something that is bigger than them or smaller than them? Think about all the different symbols that are around us. Again, they create conflict and offer judgment for your character, and shapes. We have the fat person, thin person thing. What are the perspectives and what their judgment and the emotions in around people of different shapes or things of different shapes? What do those shapes mean? Mountains, stability, strong triangular shapes. What is the symbols that are attached to those in different shapes? Think about all these layers you can add to color how the reader responds to the scene you're writing. With sound, you have the same thing. It can denote a location, trigger emotion, security, spaces, smells. Smells are wonderful. That garlicky, kind of slight burnt garlicky smell, a little bit of tomato smell, fresh bread. Is it a pizza parlor? Is it an Italian restaurant? Smells can denote a location, economic level, if that's smell of poverty or the smell of, riches and perfumes and whatever it is that is, again, symbolic. Touch, taste, same thing. Look for opportunities when you can to layer these as part of your storytelling technique as you pay attention to all the senses that are in and around us. Speaking of fantastic senses, Frank Kafka wrote, "A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us." Oh, wow, I love that. Basically, your writing must break open the reader's imagination. So you need to create an immersive environment as you write. Now, I'm not talking about 40 pages to describe the smell of a rose. Those days are pretty much gone. But within just a few words, you can often paint a picture, which brings us to the first tip. When it comes to writing with the senses, you need to verbally paint a picture. In some way, we need to see the moment. Sometimes it can take a few pages, sometimes it can take a few words to really impact us. Focus on the small details, and often the larger ones will fill in for us. We don't need every single detail around us. We don't need to see the whole picture. Sometimes the littlest detail can help paint the whole picture. Look for opportunities, not, again, like spices and seasoning in food, don't overdo it, for onomatopoeia and alliteration. It can often help by using words that sound like what they are, like clatter, and that stimulate the senses by the word choices, and alliteration where you're playing on those consonant sounds. Remember that senses are triggers. They're memory triggers, they're action triggers. You smell smoke, that's an action trigger. There are all kinds of different triggers that can motivate or change your character as all these senses are released. Use emotional language when you can. It really does help. But most of all, let the reader share in the experience and show us. Don't tell us. Basic rule for just about everything. Let's look at some examples. And I want you to be able to pause these anytime you want. Just pause them away and look at them for your own opinion about what senses are stimulated as you read these. From Wallace Stegner, From Crossing to Safety. The night was lighter than the room, and the ticking was much louder, hastier, its rhythm more broken. This is lovely. So what senses are being, used here? What identify these different senses? The night was lighter than the room. Wouldn't somebody normally write that the room was dark. The room was darker than the night. That's a really dark room. But Stegner said, no, the night was lighter than the room. It's a different way of phrasing the same thing, making fascinating choices that stimulates our senses of how dark this room really was. And not only that, but there was a clock in it. So right there, our hearing is hearing this ticking, and it's louder, a little faster, but its rhythm is more broken. Ticking is a fascinating word to use in your writing because there's so much symbolism and so much that we associate culturally with that word. We have ticking time bombs. We have ticking of the clock because your biological clock is ticking. We have all variations. So that's a very symbolic, powerful word. But what is the ticking is louder, hastier, its rhythm more broken. Fascinating. Let's look at another one. He chewed his fingernails. Now you can pause this and come up with your own, but I want you to think about he chewed his fingernails. What senses are being triggered here? Sound. That little, do you notice there's a sound that comes with people who really are chewing their nails? There's this little sucky kind of noise that they make, and then there's this spitting. It's usually when they get that piece of skin, the little cuticle, and they spit it away. So just chewing his fingernails, maybe that's triggering that familiar sound of somebody gnawing away at their nails. And what else? Do you feel a sensation? Have you had your own short nails or chewed your own and you know what that feels like, where there's just that little tiny bit of pain when you chewed a little too deep? That always that nagging little pain that's in there. So pain is one of those senses. So for some people, chewing nails is disgusting. For other people, not so much. But that's a sense. Little emotional response there. There's no descriptive words. Sometimes the fewest words can trigger all kinds of emotional and sensual feelings. Here's a fascinating photograph by Elliot Erwitt. I want you to look at this for a moment. And how are your senses being stimulated if you were to write something about this? So for some people, they think weather. You've got boots. I assume it's a woman's coat on. We've got a dog with a hat and a jacket on. You see leaves down around, so that immediately sets what the weather was that day, which is its own sensation as well. You have some comedy going on there as well. There's some mystery about what's happening to the rest of the other dog, or maybe this is the creature. Think about what other senses are stimulated here. For me, I feel the water of a light misty rain fog on my skin. Feel the warmth of the jacket that's being wrapped around. The movement of walking through a park, having one arm being yanked by a dog or maybe two dogs, and we rest for just a moment, maybe to cross the street. So maybe there's the sounds of other people in the park, or maybe this is early morning or we're just heading into twilight. It's black and white, so it's hard to know. And there's different sounds that are in the park. Just by looking at the photograph, you can feel some of those senses. Today, I washed my mother's hair for the first time. Pretty emotional statement. But think about the senses that could be stimulated with this. There is the possibility of a sense of loss, maybe some pain. Maybe there's a sense of joy. Maybe there's something kind of sexual, not as in sexy incest, but more as this is a sensual kind of experience because it's an intimate experience. What other senses? Without being told, the words make me see and feel hand hands running through hair, water, the soap, maybe the bubbles, the lather, the smell of Suave, pineapple flavor, whatever it is, lemon flavor. Even without saying the words, my senses start to be, start to go. I start to feel these things. So this is the first American team summit of Mount Everest in 1963. But look at that. There's a sense of danger. There's a sense of size and space, a sense of movement. This person is not moving fast. At that altitude, you just know. But there's a sense of urgency, of danger, of risk. Cold, of pressure, of daring, of courage. A lot of emotional responses, but think about how the senses are stimulated at this kind of altitude and this kind of adventure, and what you need to be that kind of shape. Now we have two more. I'm going to just be quiet and let you tell me what senses are stimulated from this. If you were writing this and describing this, what would it be? Now moving on to our last one. In just those 4 words written on a brightly glowing computer screen, I realized that I had lost the ability to trust anybody ever again. What senses are being triggered here? I'm going to let you figure those out. And again, just to review really quickly on this very, very quick overview, when you write with the senses, you need to paint a picture and focus on the small details. Think of this as an impressionistic artwork, the Impressionists, where they broke rules by not painting exactly what the artist saw, like you're looking in a mirror. They wanted to create an impression so that your mind would fill in those details. That's a really great way to write. Using onomatopoeia and alliteration helps, and remember that all senses are triggers. When you can, as you've seen from some of these examples, use emotional language. And above all, let the reader share in that experience. Immerse them in the experience. Let your words, craft your words to stimulate every one of those senses. And show, don't tell. So this has been another brief writing lesson from the Creative Writing Meetup at Altspace VR. You can find out more information at Altspace VR at altvr.com and on discord.me/writingvr. I'm Laurel Van Fossen, and thanks. Come join us in Altspace.